A lot of attention is being paid to the Chicago Bears when it comes to the NFL draft and what might happen at the top. But could we see more movement further on down the draft boards? We got that and much more for you on this bonus episode here from the Combine on Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this bonus coverage of the NFL Combine from Indianapolis here on Locked On NFL. I'm your host, Ross Jackson. You can find me on all your favorite social medias at Ross Jackson Nolan, one of the NFL experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And we're going to be joined by Kyle Krabs, one of the co-hosts over at Locked On NFL Scouting, and of course, the host of the illustrious Locked On Dolphins podcast. Easily one of the smartest brains in the business, going to be giving us a whole bunch of great information here that we're hearing from the Combine here in Indianapolis. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer here on the network and for checking us out as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This bonus coverage is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. It's even easier for new customers now. You can get $150 in bonus bets by simply winning any $5 bet. Just head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So without further ado, here's Kyle. We're going to be chatting a bit about all of the different prospects that are already standing out, even though drills haven't begun. But first, maybe some potential fireworks at the top of the NFL draft. And we're not talking about the Chicago Bears. Here's what Kyle had to say.
Yeah, I think when you look at the rest of the queue in the top 10, which is where you have the potential for fireworks and quarterback trades, the team that's kind of left it open-ended is New England. When you consider Washington, and they've been very transparent about adding a quarterback, whereas New England, they've kind of heard the drumbeat on the media side of things coming into the Combine, and then even here at the Combine today, I'm having a conversation. And it's don't be surprised if they move out in favor of a team that wants to come up and target a quarterback who maybe is kind of that fringe territory of if they don't move, they're not going to get one.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, is the potential for kind of the next landmine, not dissimilar to what San Francisco did when they came up from 12 to 3 in 2021, and they didn't take the right choice. But at the very least, from a team-building perspective and a strategy perspective, they kind of pushed their chips in and said, all right, let's go do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about some of those teams that might be in that range, we're thinking like maybe Raiders kind of fall into that category. I guess the Vikings are around there. The Atlanta Falcons are kind of in that area of like these teams that could potentially look to jump up. Are those some of those guys that potentially make sense there?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the right names to invoke here. When you think about the Raiders, there was the conversation when they were going through the hiring process. What's the process going to be like to get a quarterback? Right. It was a focus of the interviews for them. You've heard a lot of buzz and smoke about Minnesota and Kevin O'Connell liking J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan as the quarterback, and he's the one that's really not in the conversation to go 1-2. So I think that's the team where you have perhaps Atlanta and Minnesota, which I also think are two potential Kirk Cousins destinations in free agency. Like, does that domino, which will happen first, tip the other team to then spur a response and try to make a big play for a quarterback in that regard?
Yeah, and if we're thinking about the team trading out of 3, the New England Patriots, would the intent then be to just roll with Mac Jones, maybe try to build a little bit around him? I mean, is there really confidence with that potential quarterback situation there?
I think that team has so much work to do that I think there's kind of an understanding of we just need to pool talented players. We need resources. The one parting gift that Belichick left that team when he left is they didn't do a ton of structure or restructures of contracts. They didn't prorate a bunch of money. They didn't trade away all their draft picks. Now they need the spike in young talent to come in. But so they're in a fairly healthy cap situation, but then they have an opportunity to move out and still draft really talented players. You've kind of heard they might be a team that kicks on a veteran quarterback too. Just as they try to foundationally get this new era of New England football figured out.
Yeah, it sounds like it's so interesting because the idea of maybe a J.J. McCarthy, for instance, going at number 3, that means that one of those other top 3 quarterbacks that we've talked about all draft season could be out of that group all of a sudden. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels is up there, and then, of course, Drake Maye. Is there a quarterback there that could potentially see a fall?
I think the one that you've seen a little bit in the mock draft cycle from some of the insiders has been Drake Maye. I think you consider Washington and them hiring Cliff Kingsbury, and that paints the picture of a certain kind of quarterback. And that's not to say that Drake Maye is not athletic and doesn't have a big arm, but the other two guys certainly have a little bit more of that creative flair for the position. And I think that bodes well for him. And then if somebody obviously is coming up for McCarthy, that does leave that does leave Drake Maye as kind of the one who you don't want to call him the also-ran, because if a different section of teams had those picks, he could very easily be QB2 or QB3 just based off the criteria that you're looking for.
Yeah. So it feels like it's kind of a scheme and fit situation that could potentially lead to that. You think about Jaden Daniels as somebody that has done sort of that air raid type system before over with Arizona State before he transferred over to LSU. Feels like that might be a good pairing for a Cliff Kingsbury, for instance. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online is absolutely awesome. They've been massive for me, and they can be very helpful for you as well. I mean, think about it. If you had an extra hour in your day, how would you spend it? Obviously, you want to be doing something constructive, right? So this is an opportunity to use therapy as an opportunity to be able to learn more about what it is that makes you happy and devote more time to it. So if you've been thinking about trying it, I absolutely recommend BetterHelp. It's super simple. It's easy. You have a lot of different ways to, you take a questionnaire, they pair you up with a licensed therapist. And then if at any point you want to change, you can at no additional cost. They make it simple. They make it easy. They make it real suited to you. And that's what I love most about BetterHelp. So find what makes you happy and figure out how to spend a little bit more time taking care of all of those things with our friends over at BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon for 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This bonus coverage is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, and a place where you can make everything more, especially as a new customer, because right now, if you head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon as a new customer, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets by simply winning any $5 bet. Go and find a heavy favorite, and this is basically going to give you like 30-1 odds on something super, super easy to win on. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than what FanDuel has to offer. And don't forget all the quick bets, the live same game parlays, the exclusive props as well, and so much more. Again, $150 if that $5 bet win. So don't hesitate. Go and check them out today. FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So let's transition maybe to some of the prospect talk and everything that we're seeing. Drills begin tonight, but still interviews and everything are such a big part of what takes place here in Indianapolis. Are there any of those prospects that are already starting to kind of jump off the podium, if you will?
Terrion Arnold has the alpha corner personality very much plugged in. And you can come away from him talking about a lot of situational football stuff. He's asked about being inside in the slot, and his mentality there is like it would be as a linebacker. He's asked about playing press coverage on the outside. So like he kind of came at it from all different aspects of playing that position and being a featured guy in that position. I was very transparent but very confident in his conversations that he had. So he's one that stands out. The other one is Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman from Missouri. Who weighed in today at 285 with 34.5-inch arms, and he's going to test really well. And he went on the podium, and he was very, very quick to say, you can play me anywhere. I played on the nose at Missouri. I played in a 3 technique. I play over the tackle. I line up over the tight end. I can line him at a 2-point stance and a 3-point stance. And that kind of versatility at that size is definitely, like, I think if he's not a staple in your mock drafts before this week, I think he's going to be moving forward just because teams always gravitate toward it. It's a premium position. There's versatility, so he's scheme transcendent, so he's going to have something for everybody, and then the athleticism's there as well.
Yeah, and he only started playing football his junior year at prep and everything, and so you think about a guy that's moldable, a guy that's willing to change, that can change his body, add to his frame, and then show off all that versatility, which he also got to show off at the Senior Bowl for a little while as well. It's interesting, too, with Terrion Arnold being, this Alabama corner. The guy that everybody's been talking about coming into Indianapolis was Kool-Aid McKinstry, sometimes because of his name. But, the 2 Alabama corners were up there. Could we see maybe both of those guys potentially going first round?
I think it's possible. I think for Kool-Aid, there's a lot of other corners that have a lot of buzz. And I've heard Quinyon Mitchell's might be the fastest player here with his time. So that's kind of expectation that I have for Quinyon Mitchell is that it's a 4.2 something for Quinyon Mitchell, and
running his way straight out of Toledo and onto an NFL team.
And that's going to be probably a top half of the first round type selection when you consider the versatility that he has, the ball skills that he has, the production that he's had, and now he's going to run like that. He went to the Senior Bowl and showed he could play man coverage down there. So that's the quintessential check all the boxes, do something in season, do something in January, do something in February. Then he's going to do his interviews and his 30 visits.
Yeah.
And he's going to blow teams out of the water. Yeah. So I think for Kool-Aid in particular, when I watched him this year, I came away with the same questions that I had for him coming into the year. Mm-hmm. And I think Olu Fashanu is another player that, the offensive tackle from Penn State. So I just think if you're going to put the extra weight into this most recent year's tape, I think that does work against those guys a little bit. I don't think Fashanu falls outside the top 15 just because it's offensive tackle, but there's so many corners in this class, particularly at the top that you would consider top 50 picks, that I think that's something that could potentially work against Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yes, I can promise you, Olu Fashanu will not make it out of the top 15 because the Saints drafted 14 and no chance they would pass on a guy like that. It's Kyle Krabs. You can make sure you catch him and Joe Marino every single day over at the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast for more of this fantastic analysis. And if you're a Dolphins fan, you can check them out at Locked On Dolphins as well. Got all the good stuff for you there. Appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for coming
Ross.
through. All right, buddy. Big thank you to Kyle for taking the time to come through. And thank you very much for coming through and making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget, tomorrow we've got more coverage for you coming from the Combine, as well as, of course, our usual Locked On NFL episodes. Tomorrow's going to be Luke Braun and Tony Wiggins that are going to be bringing you all of that Friday coverage. So we appreciate you very much for making us your first listen here on the Locked On NFL podcast. And we'll see you again here very soon, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.